what are the absolute worst Brawl Stars brawlers that we have? Maybe it's Kid who completely fell off, or even Doug who has always been trash. Well, no, but in this video I'm gonna go over the 8 worst brawlers that existed, show how they even reached this horrible of a state, and at the end of the video I will talk about the 2 worst brawlers that were ever in Brawl Stars. Let's start up with the brawler that was actually really unique. This brawler right here, which is a pretty popular assassin, but when you first look at this brawler, he does look really cool and weird at the same time. It was the most played brawler for quite a while, had a massive skill cap to it, and everyone was just playing him non-stop. So what actually happened here? It's a brawler that everyone likes and is one of the worst in the game. This really weird case of a brawler being Mortis, because ever since day 1 of Mortis being added to the game, was basically considered one of the worst. So let's go over what happened with Mortis and why he was so bad, because it was really weird. When Mortis was added, he was good, a little too good, and would get nerfed. Then he was still good and got more nerfs, and then when the devs would finally over-nerf Mortis to the point where you cannot use him unless you are extremely skilled at the game, he would become completely trash. And it stayed that way for so long until getting a buff last year and finally coming back. But the thing about Mortis is that the devs did have a few reasons to not buff him, reasons that they could not really do anything about. It would just break the game, and the thing is that there is another brawler just as Mortis that was 10,000 times worse, so I will talk about it soon. But what about something else? A brawler that was trash but everyone didn't like, a brawler so annoying that the devs had to keep as one of the worst brawlers ever. So let's go back to when this was in the game, back in the end of 2022. At this time the game was doing actually pretty well, despite what people say. The updated removed boxes just came into the game. The game was doing better than quite a while that it hasn't, but there were a few issues that came at the time. Not including the removal of boxes and all of that, there were 3 brawlers that came in this update. Now, most of them were pretty alright, except for one, the most broken one of the 3, being Chester. Yeah, when Chester was added, he was simply too much. He was really strong in a lot of different aspects of the game, and the players were not loving it. So they started complaining, and it was getting really big. So big that when Chester did eventually get his nerf, he would not even be close to it. Yes, after Chester got nerfed a few weeks after being added, he would become so bad, and even after a ton of buffs non-stop, he would not be able to return, until a few months ago when he finally got a rework and became pretty good actually. There are way worse brawlers on this list though, just like this one who made a massive comeback. This brawler was so bad once but then managed to become one of the best. This brawler that for a month ruined the game, but when he was added he was one of the worst ever, being Lou. Now, why exactly was Lou so bad? Sure, you can't use him everywhere, but he can be OP in the right modes. But when Lou was first added, that wasn't the case. His shots were so hard to hit, his super didn't do any damage, and worst of all, his freeze ability that he charges would only stun you for 1 second. And after a ton of buffs later on, and the new hypercharge, Lou would finally be good and would have to get some nerfs. But what about another brawler? A brawler that would have to be nerfed so hard that it became a symbol of this treatment. A brawler that right now is pretty trash, but so good only when I play him. Let's go back a bit to a very unique time, being the Bling update in May of 2023. At this time, Brawl Stars wasn't doing super amazing. The game was just going down after the credits update. Brawl Stars wasn't really focusing on massive things like today. They were just adding a ton of small improvements and new brawlers. So when this update came around, we would get 2 very unique brawlers. The first one was Maisie, which was pretty underwhelming on day 1, and the second one, being one of the most broken brawlers ever, was Hank. And let me tell you, this guy was just completely game breaking on another level, because Hank on release had a bug on him that let every single damage boost just scale. His stats were so much better than now, and this would cause a ton of chaos. And so a few days later, Hank would get a ton of nerfs to him and unfortunately would never be able to come back to this state. And to this day, he is still one of the worst brawlers in the game. Not when I play him though, I'm pretty cracked with him, not gonna lie. But what about a brawler that was bad, but isn't that trash anymore? A brawler that did get the buffs that he deserved. This brawler that once was one of the worst in the game and was just outdated? Back in 2022, Brawl Stars wasn't doing too great, but you know who was doing worse than that? That's right, Penny. At that time, Penny was just useless? Okay, that seems too much. What actually happened to Penny? Well, she was just not fitting in. Her abilities were really old, and people thought that they weren't enough. Her gadgets were useless, being destroy your turret or shoot balls next to you. Her 2 star powers were bad, being shoot 4 balls when your turret is dead and leaving fire with every ball. And so the devs would give Penny a complete rework. And let me just say, this thing was possibly one of the best reworks that ever happened in this game. But what actually happens when these attempts don't work, and the brawler doesn't become healthy after this rework? Well, this is exactly what what happened with the next brawler, and this case was pretty insane. A brawler that was really trash being Shelly. Now, today Shelly is in a pretty okay spot. She isn't super competitive but also has a use. But the thing is that 1.5 years ago this wasn't the case. Because before the bling update in May of 2023, Shelly was actually one of the worst brawlers for over 4 straight years. This character was just unusable. It had no damage from far away, and even in close range it was so hard to hit. And so Shelly was left in the dust from 2019 until 2023, when she would get a movement speed buff completely out of nowhere, one of the biggest buffs that any brawler has ever received to this day, by the way, and go from a normal movement speed to a very fast movement speed. Just to compare, that's going from like Nita to going like Leon. And so it would finally end the era of Shelly being bad forever, unlike this brawler that was so bad, but his era isn't actually over yet. That's right, a brawler so horrible that it still is. Not only that his era of being bad is still ongoing, but it has been forever. This brawler that had a 100% win rate in World Finals, the one and only Doug. Okay, why is Doug so bad though? He should have one use at least. It's not possible for a brawler to not be viable almost anywhere. So let's go over what the current worst brawler has to offer. Doug has the shortest range in the game. He has 10,000 HP but no tank trait, so we can't use it for too much. In fact, he has 0 supercharged traits. He has a fast movement speed, so it's not even that OP. And apart from being able to heal teammates that you have to be so close to, he has nothing. So yeah, Doug is bad. Really bad. But why is he still bad? Why can't you just rerock him already? So the thing is, there is a chance that Supercell already tried doing something to fix Doug and we don't know it yet. But we don't know it yet. So with this one, we're just gonna have to wait for the day that Doug will finally be good. At least he was still used in the World Finals, which is one out of the billion things that he sucks at. But I do have one final brawler on the list. One final brawler that by so many is the worst brawler in the history of Brawl Stars. A brawler that is pretty strong right now. A brawler named Colette. And this story goes back such a long time, all the way to season 3. No, not this one. This one from September of 2020. This season was pretty unique. It was a really small update plus a ton of new lore added. I won't get into the idea of lore in this video, but it was pretty fun for a lot of people. But with this update obviously came the new season. And if you know anything about Brawl Stars, before the start of 2024, with every single new season we would get a new chromatic brawler in the past. And this time it was no different with Colette. So everything was ready to release. The new lore video, the new season theme and skins, and for some reason the dev team thought that Colette was ready. But when Colette was released into the game, unfortunately for some whalers here, she was not what you would expect. Because at the beginning the stats of Colette were so low, her supercharge, her minimum damage and abilities were so awfully bad, that from this point on, Colette was considered the worst brawler to ever exist in the history of this game. She literally couldn't kill a tick with the star power. That's how bad she was, and to this day, nothing would be able to top this off. But what about Doug? Well, if you want Doug to also get a buff like Colette, you have to just subscribe right now.